Queer ecology examines the intersections between sexuality, nature, and politics. It challenges the assumption that nature is inherently heterosexual and queer identities are unnatural. Queer ecology asks us to reconsider how we understand both nature and sexuality, showing these categories are deeply interconnected rather than separate. The famous film Brokeback Mountain illustrates several key queer ecological themes. The romance between Ennis and Jack unfolds in a wilderness setting, suggesting that nature can be a space of homoerotic possibility rather than exclusively heterosexual. Their relationship is portrayed as natural in contrast to urban, unnatural gay identities. This reveals how ideas about nature and sexuality are socially constructed and politically charged. The history of queer ecology begins with the rise of evolutionary thought and sexology in the 19th century. Darwin's theory of sexual selection linked reproduction to fitness, creating a framework where non reproductive sexual behaviors appeared deviant or unnatural. Sexologists like Havelock Ellis and Richard von Graft Ebbing further developed these ideas, categorizing homosexuality as either a congenital condition or a form of degeneracy. These scientific discourses had lasting consequences. They naturalized heterosexuality while pathologizing other sexualities. Environmental thinkers often assumed that healthy environments were those where heterosexual reproduction flourished. When scientists observed homosexual behavior in animals, they frequently interpreted it as evidence of environmental damage rather than natural diversity. Many researchers document same sex behavior in hundreds of animal species, demonstrating that sexual diversity is widespread in nature. This biological exuberance undermines claims that queerness is unnatural and reveals how heteronormative bias has distorted scientific knowledge. Queer ecology also examines how natural spaces have been shaped by sexual politics. Parks and wilderness areas have historically been designed to promote heteronormative behavior. In the late 19th century, parks were created partly as a response to anxiety about urban degeneration, including homosexuality. Outdoor activities were promoted as ways to restore threatened masculinity. Urban parks were designed to facilitate heterosexual courtship while discouraging other forms of sexual expression. The layout of paths, benches, and gazebos created spaces for visible heterosexual romance while making public sex difficult. These design choices reflect broader efforts to regulate sexuality through the organization of space. Despite these attempts to control, queer communities have reclaimed natural spaces. Gay men have used parks for cruising and community building, challenging heteronormative assumptions about appropriate public behavior. Lesbian separatist communities in Oregon and elsewhere have created alternative environments based on ecological and feminist principles. These spaces demonstrate that nature can be queered, reimagined as a site of sexual diversity and political resistance. The relationship between nature and sexuality is also intertwined with nationalism. In Canada, for example, the cano serves as a national symbol associated with a particular form of heterosexual masculinity. The joke that a Canadian is someone who knows how to make love in a cano naturalizes heterosexuality while connecting it to national identity and the land. This association between nation, nature, and heterosexuality has colonial dimensions. Indigenous peoples were often displaced from their lands in the name of nature conservation. Their sexual practices were seen as unnatural by European colonizers, providing justification for cultural genocide. The forced assimilation of indigenous children through residential schools where sexual abuse was rampant represents a violent intersection of colonial, sexual, and environmental politics. Queer ecology also engages with the emotional dimensions of environmental loss. The concept of melancholy natures draws on Freud's theory of melancholia to understand how we mourn environmental destruction. In a culture that often fails to recognize non human life as grievable, environmental loss becomes an acknowledged wound. Writers like Grover and Jarman have explored these themes in their work. Grover's Not Enough links the devastation of AIDS with the clear cutting of northern forests, showing how personal and environmental grief intersect. Jarman's Modern Nature documents his gardening in the shadow of nuclear power plant, creating beauty in a damaged landscape. Both writers suggest that acknowledging loss is essential to developing an ethical relationship with the natural world. Ellen Meloy's nature writing offers another perspective on queer ecology. Her work draws on Wilson's concept of biophilia, the human affinity for other life forms, while giving it a queer twist. Meloy explores cognitive adventuring, crossing species lines through imagination and empathy. Her approach resonates with Deleuze and Guattari's concept of becoming animal. Rather than identifying with or dominating other species, Meloy suggests we can enter into creative alliances with them. This involves a kind of desire that is not reproductive but experimental and symbiotic. Queer desire is a fundamental life force that drives evolution through creative involution, non-linear, collaborative forms of change. Queer ecology also addresses reproductive justice. Mainstream environmentalism often focuses on population control, framing non white reproduction as a threat to the planet. This approach ignores the ways that consumption patterns in wealthy nations drive environmental destruction. It also reinforces racist and colonial assumptions about who deserves to reproduce. A queer ecological perspective challenges these assumptions. It recognizes that reproductive justice involves not just the right to control one's body, but also the right to raise children in healthy environments. This perspective connects environmental activism with struggles for racial and economic justice, showing how different forms of oppression are intertwined. Queer ecology offers a radical rethinking of our relationship to nature. It challenges the assumption that nature is a source of fixed norms, instead, showing that natural diversity includes sexual diversity. It reveals how spaces have been organized to enforce heteronormativity and how these spaces can be reclaimed. It connects environmental destruction with other forms of social injustice, including colonialism, racism, and homophobia. By bringing together queer theory and ecological thought, queer ecology opens new possibilities for both environmentalism and sexual politics. It suggests that caring for the natural world requires challenging the norms that limit our understanding of both nature and sexuality. Queer ecology invites us to imagine more just and sustainable ways of living on this planet, recognizing that our fates are intertwined with all other forms of life.